Hello, welcome back to Mark's Garden UK. Agapanthus, or rather dead Agapanthus. This is my Agapanthus disaster, and it's also my Agapanthus agony. We've had these Agapanthus for probably up to 10 years, some of the oldest ones. And every year, every spring, they've come back strong and they've produced amazing blooms, even up to last spring, when the blooms from these Agapanthus were absolutely magnificent. And I will run some footage of these Agapanthus whilst I'm talking to you. But this is the result of carelessness and complacency. In this video, I'm going to tell you how to avoid this, what I should have done whilst I'm potting up some replacement Agapanthus, and I'm going to share with you everything I know about Agapanthus, probably some stuff that you already know and possibly even some new stuff. So these Agapanthus, in the early days we used to put them indoors for the winter, but we've been lulled into a false sense of security, and last winter, foolishly, I left them all out. And as you're probably aware, in the UK we had a run of very severe and sustained -7, -8, up to -10, or down to -10 I should say, temperatures, and it's killed every single one of my Agapanthus. There is no life left in these plants, and it upsets me a little bit, but at the same time I know it's my own fault. I have to take responsibility, and I could have avoided it, and that's what I'm going to tell you in this video, how to avoid this and what I'm going to do differently next time. Now, I've been living in hope that if I waited long enough with a bit of warmth and a bit of sunlight and a bit of water, they will spring back into life, but I'm afraid it's time to give up hope. I'm going to have a look at one of these plants just to see if there's any greenery in the root system before I abandon them all and discard them all. Let's take a spade and chop this through the middle and see what we've got. What we've got, it's just a lot of dead roots, and you can see that here, it's just completely gone. If there was any life left at all in here, there would be at least some green matter, but there is nothing. Crocks, lots of roots, a couple of weeds, but absolutely no green matter. There's a root, it's soggy, it's wet, it's gone. This and all the others will be going in the bottom of my raised bed to provide a little bit of volume. Anyway, let's put that to one side. Let's talk about what we can do to avoid this in future and how to care for Agapanthus. Now, I am going to reuse these terracotta pots for these 4 new plants which I'm about to pot up, and I shall talk to you about Agapanthus whilst I'm doing that task. And the reason I like these terracotta pots is twofold. They've aged really nicely, they've got a lovely kind of patina on the outside now, and that takes years to come. And also, terracotta is breathable, which is good for these plants. These like hot conditions and they don't like waterlogged soil, so terracotta, as opposed to plastic pots, allows them to breathe. So I will be reusing these 4 lovely aged terracotta pots, but that is going in the bottom of my raised bed. Now, looking back at my collection of ex-Agapanthus here, the dead ones, there are 2 different types here. There are evergreen ones that keep their leaves throughout the winter season, and there are deciduous ones that shed all their foliage. The foliage dies back. And the evergreen ones are not as hardy as the ones that are deciduous. So in principle, the evergreen ones do need more protection, winter protection, than the deciduous ones. Having said that, I am now, from now on, going to protect all my Agapanthus, regardless of the type, in the same way. I'm going to talk about winter protection in a moment whilst I pot up the new Agapanthus, the replacements. Now this time round, we're going for white Agapanthus. Agapanthus come in lots of different shapes and sizes. You get some that the heads are like footballs, and you get others that are tiny and delicate. And they also come in several different colours, from white to blue and amethyst in the middle. And I'm going for white this time because the theme I'm going for at the front of the cottage is kind of a white theme. So these are the new ones. Now, it's said that Agapanthus like to be crammed in their pots and completely pot bound, but I understand that that's a bit of an urban myth. It's a bit of a false fact. They do like to be cozy in their pots. They like a restricted root run, but they don't like to be completely pot bound. Now, the interesting thing about Agapanthus, it will flower well when it's just about at the right pot boundness. If it's got too much soil, it won't flower well. And if it's not got enough soil, it won't flower well. So there's going to be that peak when it's flowering wonderfully, and then the following year it will start to not flower as well. And that's probably when you start to need to think about either repotting them or dividing them. So it's a bit of a false rumour that they love to be completely pot bound, but they do like to be cosy in their pots. Now, these are small plants for these big pots, which suggests and probably implies that that won't flower particularly well for a couple of years, but that's okay. I'm happy to give it extra room. But if I wanted those to flower well immediately, I'd probably put 2 in one pot like that. Now, in my little potting up kit here, I've got some peat-free compost. I've also got some perlite, because these like well-drained soil, so the perlite will help to increase the drainage. And if you want to know the difference between perlite and vermiculite, there's a video on my channel. I'll link to it at the end of this one, and I'll put a link to the perlite products in the description box below this video. I've also got some slow release plant food and some crocks, which are essentially just broken old terracotta pots. And the reason for those is you put them over the hole in the bottom of the plant pot, and they just act as a kind of filter. They let the water go through, but they stop the soil from seeping through. I'm going to put some of those at the bottom of there. So that's the first stage of the preparation, because these plants like lots of sun and well-drained pots. So I'm going to measure out approximately 4 pots of compost, because I'll know that that's approximately how much I need. I'm not going to fill the pots completely, because I will leave a gap at the top for watering and some gravel, and I'll also leave some space for the pot to go into. So there's 1, and I'll do 4 of those on here, and then I'll mix the perlite in. Now, the perlite is to aid drainage, and as I say, there's a video on vermiculite and perlite. You can see it's giving off a dust, so don't get too close to it. Don't do it on a windy day. Some people even suggest you should wear a mask and damp it down before you start using it. I'm putting this into relatively damp compost anyway. That's a bit of a mix. Now, I'm going to use these slow release plant foods here. There's a link to that in the description box below this video, but not too much, just a little bit to keep them going. And then I'll give that a nice thorough mix, and that will be my planting medium. So here's my peat-free compost with perlite for extra drainage and some extra feed. And here are the plants, and here are the 4 pots, which have all got a good layer of crocks in the bottom. Now, these pots had my Agapanthus in last year, and there are certain Agapanthus diseases, and if you're concerned about Agapanthus diseases, clearly give your pots a good clean before you reuse them. I'm not concerned about Agapanthus diseases. I know for a fact what killed my Agapanthus, and it was my incompetence in leaving them out all winter when I should have protected them. We'll talk about protection in a moment. Right, so there's the plant. It's already got 2 or 3 lovely little sprouting crowns in there, some lovely roots in the bottom, and I shall place that in now. I'm going to bring it up to about 1.5 inches below the pot, so that what I can do with these is when I'm watering them and I get into a routine with watering them, I can give them a good soaking and then allow them to almost dry out between each watering. So that will sit just below the top of the pot, and that's where it is. Now, the other thing I do, is I'll show you this in a moment, is I always cover the top of my soil with gravel, because it acts as a good mulch. You can see it on these olive trees and my bay trees behind. It acts as a good mulch. It helps retain some of the moisture, and it stops weeds. So there we go, that's nicely potted up now. Now these like well drained, full sun. In the winter time, The deciduous ones, the foliage will die back. The evergreen ones obviously will stay evergreen. And the blooms, you've got two choices. You can take the blooms off, you can deadhead them, and you can even take seeds from the blooms and try and propagate them from seed. Or you can leave them on because they're quite architectural and they look nice. They give winter interest in the garden. If you do deadhead them, they might produce more flowers. So the choice is yours, really. I leave mine on. And I was almost tempted last year to try and propagate them from seed. In terms of propagation, you can propagate these from seed, but it does take quite a bit of time. So sometimes the best way of getting these to propagate is really just to divide them. When you get to that stage, when they're in a pot for a few years and they're stopping producing satisfactory blooms, take them out of the pot and just take a sharp shovel, just divide it. You can be quite brutal and just divide it up and just put the pieces that you've divided into pots, as I'm doing here. And it might take a couple of years, as I've already mentioned, for them to reach the stage where they're optimally pot bound, and then they'll start producing flowers again. A bit more in the bottom of that just to lift it up a bit. So I'll now go ahead, plant all four of these Agapanthus, and then I'll come back to you and talk to you about what I'm going to do next year to make sure that these get through the winter. So there we are, 4 newly potted up white Agapanthus for the front of the cottage. I will now give these a really good soaking in. It's important to keep them well watered in the first year whilst they're getting established. Once they are established, their roots become like little swollen reservoirs of moisture, and they can be quite drought tolerant, but that's when they're established. So keep them well watered until they become well established. In terms of winter care, now I've already admitted that I lost my Agapanthus through my own complacency. I knew what I should have done. I should have taken them all into a light, cool, frost-free space and stopped washing them and just not having them exposed to any severe cold temperatures. No Agapanthus would have survived what I put my Agapanthus through last winter, which was a sustained period of, as I've already said, I'm repeating myself, -7. But I know I'm not alone. Several people in my neighbourhood have lost their Agapanthus. I was talking to a neighbour the other day, and he had a treasured Agapanthus that belonged to his mum, and sadly he's lost that. If you take the precautions that I should have taken, which was moving them to a cool, light, frost-free environment, and stop washing them and let them dry out till spring, they would have survived, as they have done for the last, mostly in the main, up to 10 years. In the springtime, give them a feed, a top dress with high potash food, and it will encourage them to sprout and produce lovely blooms. And as I've said about blooms, they bloom best when they are snug, but not too overcrowded. So there'll be an optimum point. These have probably got too much soil in these pots to bloom very well this year, but hopefully next year I'll get a spectacular display, and you can see how they turn out if you subscribe and hit the notifications bell. I hope you found that useful and interesting. Don't forget, you can support my channel by shopping through my Amazon links on my website. It doesn't have to be a gardening product, but I do receive a small commission on each product that gets bought through my links, and it helps me to continue to do projects in the garden. I appreciate your support. Thank you very much. The same is true of the perlite and the slow release fertilizer. Those are Amazon links, and I do get paid. So I hope you've enjoyed that and found it informative, and I'm sorry if you've also lost your Agapanthus this year, and I hope that if you get more and you follow these steps, you have a much better experience next time. That's all for now. I'll see you soon for some more Agapanthus adventures.